In the vast expanse of the forest, under the dimming glow of the setting sun, a helpless baby horse found itself in the most terrifying situation. A pack of hungry, relentless wolves closed in on its fragile, defenseless body, with no one around to protect it. Survival seemed impossible. But just when all hope was lost, something truly unbelievable happened. What unfolds next will leave you speechless. Join us for a gripping story of danger, courage, and an unexpected hero. The vast expanse of the forest stretched endlessly under the dimming glow of the setting sun. The tall pines swayed gently in the evening breeze, casting long shadows on the ground. Among the foliage, a faint but distinct sound echoed, a cry, fragile and trembling. It came from a small clearing where a young foal, barely a few weeks old, stood alone. Its white eyes darted nervously. The baby horse, a striking chestnut with a white blaze down its face, shivered despite the warmth of the evening. Separated from its herd after a sudden thunderstorm the night before, it had wandered aimlessly, its small legs trembling with exhaustion. Each step seemed heavier than the last, the weight of its solitude pressing down like the dark clouds looming above. Unbeknownst to the foal, danger was closing in. Deep in the shadows of the trees, yellow eyes gleamed. A pack of wolves, lean and hungry, had caught the scent of the foal's vulnerability. Their leader, a large gray wolf with a scar across his muzzle, signaled with a low growl. Slowly, the pack began to spread out, their movements coordinated in silence as they encircled the clearing. The foal froze, its ears twitching at the faint rustle of leaves. Its nostrils flared as it caught an unfamiliar, sharp, predatory scent. A low growl broke the stillness, sending a shiver down the foal's spine. Instinctively, it tried to run, but its tired legs gave way, and it stumbled to the ground. From the edge of the forest, an unlikely witness observed the scene. A towering black stallion with a muscular build and a coat that shimmered like polished obsidian. Known to the locals as Midnight, the stallion was the leader of a small herd that roamed the forest's edges. Midnight had seen many threats in his time: storms, predators, and even humans. But nothing had stirred his instincts like the sight of the helpless foal surrounded by wolves. Midnight's ears pinned back as he stomped a powerful hoof, the sound echoing like a warning drum. His sharp eyes locked onto the wolves, who were now circling closer to the trembling foal. The stallion's muscles tensed, and his nostrils flared as he took a step forward, assessing the danger. The wolves paid no attention to the approaching stallion. Their focus was solely on the foal. The leader of the pack crouched low, ready to lunge. The foal let out a desperate whinny, its small voice barely audible over the rustling leaves. It was a cry for help, though there seemed to be no hope of rescue. But Midnight heard that cry. With a powerful neigh that split the air like thunder, he broke into a gallop. His hooves pounded the ground with the force of a rolling storm. His sudden charge startled the wolves, who turned their heads just in time to see the stallion bearing down on them. Midnight's sheer size and speed were a sight to behold. The black stallion lowered his head, his sharp eyes fixed on the pack leader. The wolf snarled, standing its ground for a moment before realizing the sheer force barreling toward it. Midnight reared up, his powerful hooves slicing through the air before crashing down with a force that sent the wolves scattering. The pack hesitated, their instincts torn between hunger and self-preservation. Midnight stood tall, his head high and his eyes burning with defiance. The foal lay behind him, its trembling body shielded by the stallion's massive frame. Midnight let out another fierce neigh, daring the wolves to make their move. The wolves regrouped, their hunger driving them to challenge Midnight's dominance. But the stallion was not alone for long. Rustling sounds from the trees signaled the arrival of an unexpected ally. Who or what would come to Midnight and the foal's aid in this life-or-death standoff? Midnight stood his ground, his black coat glistening in the fading sunlight. Every muscle in his body was taut with readiness. The wolves circled him, their low growls filling the clearing. The leader of the pack, with its scarred muzzle, bared its teeth, inching closer to the trembling foal behind Midnight. The air was thick with tension, a battle of wills unfolding between predator and protector. Midnight stomped his hooves, his deep, resonant neigh echoing through the forest, a warning not to be ignored. But the wolves were relentless, their hunger overpowering their caution. The pack leader lunged forward slightly, testing Midnight's resolve. The stallion reared up, his powerful hooves slicing through the air before crashing back to the ground. The wolves flinched momentarily, retreating, but it was clear they were not done. Midnight's sharp eyes scanned the edges of the forest. His ears twitched at the faint rustle of leaves. He was not alone. From the dense underbrush emerged a smaller figure, its movements swift and deliberate. It was a coyote, lean and agile, with a coat that shimmered in hues of gold and gray. Midnight recognized the creature immediately. It was Ember, a rogue coyote who had often roamed near the outskirts of his herd's territory. While coyotes were typically seen as scavengers and opportunists, Ember had a reputation for being different. She was a loner, but one who had earned Midnight's respect by keeping her distance and never preying on the vulnerable. Ember darted into the clearing, her sharp eyes assessing the scene in an instant. The wolves growled, their attention momentarily diverted by the new arrival. Ember let out a piercing yip, a sound that cut through the tension like a blade. Midnight did not move. His instincts told him to trust her presence. The wolves, however, viewed Ember as a nuisance, a competitor intruding on their hunt. The pack leader snarled and lunged toward Ember, but she was faster. She darted to the side, her movements precise and calculated, drawing the wolves' attention away from Midnight and the foal. Ember's agility was mesmerizing as she weaved through the pack, her sharp yips and snarls creating chaos among the predators. Midnight seized the moment. He turned to the foal, nudging it gently with his muzzle. "Get up," his body language seemed to say. The foal, trembling but understanding the urgency, struggled to its feet. Ember continued her daring display, snapping at the heels of the wolves and leading them away from the clearing. Midnight positioned himself beside the foal, shielding it as they began to move. With Ember buying them precious time, Midnight guided the foal toward a safer part of the forest. The foal stumbled, its legs weak and unsteady, but Midnight stayed close, nudging it forward with gentle but firm encouragement. The pack, realizing they were being outmaneuvered, redirected their focus back to Midnight and the foal. Ember let out another sharp yip, positioning herself between the wolves and her newfound allies. The pack leader hesitated, its scarred muzzle wrinkling with frustration. It was a standoff once more, but this time the odds had shifted. Suddenly, the distant sound of hoofbeats filled the air. Midnight's herd, alerted by the commotion, emerged from the trees like a cavalry charge. The sight of the united herd, led by another strong mare, sent the wolves into a frenzy of uncertainty. Outnumbered and outmatched, the pack leader let out a frustrated growl before retreating into the shadows. One by one, the wolves disappeared, their howls echoing faintly as they fled. The clearing fell silent, except for the labored breathing of the foal and the gentle snorts of the horses. Ember stood a few feet away, her golden coat streaked with dirt but her posture proud. Midnight turned to her, his deep eyes meeting hers in a silent acknowledgement of gratitude. The foal, now leaning against Midnight's side for support, let out a soft whinny, a sound of relief and safety. As the herd encircled Midnight and the foal, Ember began to retreat. Her job done, she glanced back once, her sharp eyes meeting Midnight's, before disappearing into the shadows of the forest. Midnight watched her go, knowing their paths might cross again. That night, under a canopy of stars, the herd rested in a protected glade. The foal, nestled against Midnight, finally slept peacefully. The danger had passed, but the memory of the day lingered. Midnight had protected his own, but the unexpected alliance with Ember had reminded him that even the most unlikely bonds could lead to salvation. As the herd regrouped and the forest settled into quiet, a new challenge loomed. The foal's ordeal had left it weakened, and the journey back to safety was fraught with uncertainty. Would they make it home before another threat emerged? The first light of dawn spilled over the forest, painting the trees in soft hues of orange and gold. The herd stirred slowly, their forms moving like shadows through the glade. Midnight stood vigilant, his dark eyes scanning the forest for any signs of lingering danger. The foal, still nestled against his side, shifted slightly. Its frail legs trembled as it attempted to stand. The events of the previous day had taken their toll. The foal's small body bore the marks of exhaustion, its steps hesitant and unsteady. Midnight nudged it gently, his powerful frame radiating calm and reassurance. Around them, the herd moved in a protective formation, their presence a shield against the unknown. The journey home would not be easy. The storm that had scattered the herd had also altered the landscape, making familiar paths treacherous and unpredictable. Midnight knew they couldn't linger in the glade for long. The scent of the wolves still lingered in the air, and the forest predators would not hesitate to exploit any vulnerability. As the herd began to move, Midnight took the lead, the foal close by his side. Each step was deliberate, the stallion's sharp instincts guiding him through the maze of trees and uneven terrain. The foal stumbled often, its frailty evident, but it refused to stop. Midnight's occasional nudges and quiet snorts seemed to convey a simple but powerful message. Keep going. You're not alone. The herd followed in a tight formation, their hooves crunching softly against the forest floor. The older Mares occasionally glanced back at the foal, their maternal instincts on high alert. Despite the unspoken tension, there was a sense of unity within the group, a collective determination to see the foal safely back to the safety of the plains. Hours passed, and the sun climbed higher into the sky. The foal's movements grew slower, its breaths labored. Midnight paused at a small stream that cut through the forest. Its clear waters shimmered in the sunlight. He lowered his head, drinking deeply, before encouraging the foal to do the same. The cool water seemed to revive the foal slightly, its legs regaining some strength as it drank. As they rested briefly by the stream, the sound of rustling leaves caught Midnight's attention. His ears pricked forward, his body tensing as he scanned the trees. The herd stilled, their movements frozen as they waited for Midnight's signal. From the underbrush, a familiar figure emerged. Ember, the rogue coyote who had helped them the previous day. Ember approached cautiously, her sharp eyes flicking between Midnight and the foal. She stopped a few feet away, her posture low and non-threatening. Midnight did not move, his gaze steady as he watched her. Ember let out a soft whine, her body language suggesting she meant no harm. The stallion gave a low snort, a sound of acknowledgement, before turning back to the foal. Ember's presence seemed to embolden the foal, who took a few tentative steps toward her. The coyote did not move, allowing the foal to sniff her cautiously. After a moment, the foal let out a soft whinny, its fear replaced by curiosity. Ember responded with a quiet yip, her tail wagging slightly as she stepped back, giving the foal space. Midnight watched the interaction closely, his instincts balancing caution with trust. Ember had proven herself to be an ally, and her presence now seemed less a threat and more a reassurance. As the herd resumed their journey, Ember trotted alongside them, her movements light and unobtrusive. She stayed at a respectful distance, her keen senses alert for any sign of danger. The forest began to thin, the trees giving way to open fields bathed in the warm glow of late afternoon. The sight of the familiar plains brought a sense of relief to the herd. Midnight's pace quickened slightly, his powerful strides guiding the foal through the final stretch of their journey. Ember paused at the edge of the forest, watching as the herd moved toward the open plains. The foal stopped and looked back at her, letting out a small, hesitant whinny. Ember tilted her head, her amber eyes soft with understanding. She let out one last yip before disappearing into the shadows of the trees. Her job was done. As the herd reached the safety of their home, Midnight let out a triumphant neigh, his voice carrying across the plains. The foal, now standing a little taller, leaned against him briefly before trotting toward the other Mares. The danger had passed, and the herd was whole again. As the herd settled back into their routine, Midnight couldn't shake the feeling that their journey had only just begun. What new challenges would arise, and would Ember's role in their lives prove to be more significant than he realized? The herd had returned to the familiar safety of the plains, the open expanse offering a sense of freedom and security. The foal, though still visibly weak, had begun to explore under the watchful eyes of the mares. Midnight stood on a small rise, his powerful silhouette framed by the setting sun, surveying the horizon. The events of the past days lingered in his mind. The wolves, the storm, and the unexpected help from Ember. The stallion's instincts told him that their challenges were far from over. As the herd grazed peacefully, Midnight's ears twitched at a distant sound. It was faint but distinct, the rhythmic pounding of hooves. His body tensed, his sharp eyes scanning the horizon. At first, he saw nothing, but then emerging from the shimmering heat of the plains, a group of riders on horseback appeared. The humans were approaching quickly, their presence sending a ripple of unease through the herd. The mares raised their heads, their movements growing restless as the riders drew nearer. Midnight let out a deep snort, his body language signaling the herd to gather. The foal, still uncertain and fragile, trotted to Midnight's side, its wide eyes filled with fear. Midnight positioned himself protectively, his towering frame a shield against the encroaching threat. The riders slowed as they neared the herd, their voices carrying across the plains. Midnight recognized the tone, assertive and commanding. These were not casual travelers. They were wranglers, likely seeking to capture wild horses for sale or labor. Midnight had encountered their kind before, and the memory of those confrontations burned in his mind. The riders carried ropes and lassos, their movements purposeful and predatory. The lead rider, a burly man with a weathered face and a wide-brimmed hat, pointed toward Midnight. "That black stallion," he said, his voice audible even from a distance. "He's the one we want, and that foal too. They'll fetch a good price for both." Midnight's ears flattened against his head, his muscles coiling like a spring. The herd moved closer together, their instincts driving them to protect one another. The riders spread out, their horses kicking up dust as they prepared to circle the herd. Midnight let out a piercing neigh, his voice a rallying cry for the herd to stay together. The first rider swung his lasso, aiming for one of the mares. Midnight charged forward, his hooves thundering against the ground as he intercepted the rope midair. His sheer force drove the rider's horse back. The wrangler cursed, yanking the lasso back and readying it again. The foal, frightened by the commotion, stumbled as it tried to keep up with the moving herd. In the chaos, a familiar figure appeared at the edge of the plains. Ember, the rogue coyote, had been watching from the tree-line. Her keen eyes took in the scene, her sharp instincts sensing the danger. Without hesitation, she darted across the grass, her small frame weaving through the commotion with surprising speed. Ember reached the foal, positioning herself between it and the nearest rider. She let out a series of sharp, piercing yips, her voice cutting through the noise like a warning siren. The riders hesitated, startled by the sudden appearance of the coyote. Ember barked and lunged at the riders' horses, her quick movements unsettling the larger animals. The horses reared, their riders struggling to maintain control. Taking advantage of the distraction, Midnight led the herd in a coordinated charge. Their combined strength forced the riders to retreat momentarily. The stallion's presence was commanding, his powerful frame and unwavering courage inspiring the herd to stand their ground. Ember continued her fearless assault, snapping and barking at the riders. Her small form was a surprising force against the human intruders. Realizing they were outmaneuvered, the lead rider shouted a retreat. The wranglers pulled back, their horses galloping away in a cloud of dust. Midnight and the herd watched them disappear over the horizon, their presence a stark reminder of the dangers that still lurked. As the dust settled, Midnight turned to Ember. His deep eyes reflected gratitude. The coyote stood panting, her golden coat streaked with dirt, but her posture was triumphant. The foal, now calmer, nuzzled against Midnight's side, its small body trembling less with each passing moment. Ember let out a soft whine, her tail wagging slightly before she retreated to the edge of the plains. That night, the herd rested under a blanket of stars, their sense of unity stronger than ever. Midnight stood watch, his gaze scanning the darkened horizon. The foal slept peacefully at his feet, its soft breaths a testament to the resilience that had carried it through so much. Midnight's thoughts lingered on Ember's bravery. Her actions reminded him that even the smallest allies could make the greatest difference. As the herd settled into the safety of the plains, Midnight couldn't shake the feeling that the riders would return. Would Ember's unexpected loyalty continue to protect them, or would the herd face an even greater threat? The stillness of the plains was deceptive, offering a false sense of security under the expansive sky. The herd grazed cautiously, their movements synchronized as they kept close to one another. Midnight stood on a small rise, his dark figure silhouetted against the golden light of dawn. His sharp eyes scanned the horizon. Every muscle in his body was taut. The memory of the wranglers lingered like a shadow, and he knew they would not give up so easily. The foal, now slightly stronger but still fragile, stayed near Midnight, its small frame leaning against the stallion for reassurance. The Mares watched over it protectively, forming a living barrier that shielded the youngest member of the herd. Yet, despite their vigilance, the sense of impending danger grew stronger with each passing moment. Midnight's instincts were proven right when, just before midday, the distant sound of hooves broke the fragile peace. This time, the riders were more prepared. They approached in a tighter formation, their horses moving with precision and purpose. The lead rider, his wide-brimmed hat shading his determined eyes, carried a coiled lasso in one hand and a sharp whistle in the other. The herd reacted immediately. Midnight let out a sharp neigh, rallying the group into motion. The Mares encircled the foal, their hooves kicking up dust as they prepared to flee. But the riders were quicker this time, fanning out to block the herd's escape routes. Midnight charged toward the closest rider, his powerful frame a blur of motion. The rider's horse balked, rearing back as Midnight reared up, his hooves slicing through the air. From the edge of the plains, a familiar figure appeared. Ember, the rogue coyote, darted out of the tree line, her small frame moving with lightning speed. She barked sharply, drawing the attention of the riders. Ember's sudden presence unsettled the wranglers' horses. The high-pitched yips caused them to buck and sidestep nervously. The lead rider cursed under his breath, his frustration evident. "We'll take the stallion first," he shouted, signaling to his men. Two riders focused their efforts on Midnight, their lassos spinning in wide arcs above their heads. Midnight dodged the first lasso, his movements precise despite the chaos. The second lasso grazed his flank, but fell short as he twisted sharply, his agility defying the rider's expectations. While Midnight fought valiantly, Ember worked to distract the riders. She darted between their horses, snapping at their heels and forcing them to break formation. Her actions gave the herd precious seconds to regroup. The Mares, driven by maternal instinct, pushed the foal toward a narrow path that led to the safety of a nearby rocky outcrop. Midnight noticed the herd moving and let out a powerful neigh, signaling them to follow the path. He turned his focus back to the riders, his sharp eyes burning with defiance. Ember joined him, her small form standing firm beside the towering stallion. Together, they created a barrier of courage that the riders couldn't easily overcome. But the wranglers were relentless. The lead rider dismounted, his boots crunching against the dry grass as he approached on foot. He carried a coiled rope in one hand, his movements deliberate and predatory. Midnight pawed at the ground, his ears pinned back as he prepared for the inevitable confrontation. Just as the tension reached its peak, a sudden roar echoed across the plains from the direction of the rocky outcrop. A herd of wild mustangs appeared, their manes flowing like banners in the wind. The sound of their hooves was thunderous, their presence an overwhelming force of nature. The wranglers froze, their faces pale as they realized they were outnumbered. The mustangs charged toward the wranglers, their leader, a massive gray stallion, letting out a battle cry that resonated across the plains. Midnight joined the charge, his black coat shimmering in the sunlight as he led the counterattack. Ember followed closely, her sharp barks adding to the cacophony. The wranglers had no choice but to retreat. They scrambled onto their horses, their plans in shambles, as the combined forces of Midnight's herd and the wild mustangs drove them away. The lead rider glanced back once, his face twisted in frustration, before disappearing over the horizon. As the dust settled, the wild mustangs slowed to a halt. Their leader exchanged a respectful glance with Midnight. The gray stallion let out a low neigh before leading his herd back toward the rocky outcrop. Midnight stood tall, his chest heaving, but his spirit unbroken. Ember trotted to his side, her tail wagging as she looked up at him with quiet triumph. The foal, now safe among the mares, let out a soft whinny. Midnight approached, lowering his head to nuzzle the foal gently. The danger had passed, but the memory of the battle lingered, a reminder of the strength found in unity and the courage of unexpected allies. As the herd settled once more, Midnight couldn't ignore the bond forming between his herd and the wild mustangs. Could their alliance hold the key to facing even greater challenges in the future? The plains were still a quiet serenity, settling over the land in the aftermath of the dramatic confrontation. Midnight stood at the crest of a hill, the wind ruffling his dark mane, as he watched the wild mustangs retreat toward the horizon. Their leader, the massive gray stallion, paused briefly to glance back. The silent exchange between the two stallions was brief but profound, a shared understanding of mutual respect and the strength found in solidarity. The herd began to regroup, the tension easing as they returned to grazing. The foal, now resting under the watchful eyes of the mares, seemed calmer, its small body finally relaxing after the relentless dangers of the past days. Midnight made his way toward the foal, his steady presence a reassurance to the youngest member of the herd. He nuzzled the foal gently, his deep, calming breaths conveying that they were safe for now. Ember, the rogue coyote, lingered at the edge of the group. Her golden coat was streaked with dirt, but her posture was one of quiet pride. She had played her part, proving her loyalty once again. Midnight approached her, lowering his head slightly in a gesture of acknowledgement. Ember let out a soft whine, her tail wagging as she met his gaze. It was an unlikely alliance, but one that had saved them all. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the plains in hues of orange and purple, the herd began to settle for the night. Midnight remained on guard, his sharp eyes scanning the horizon. The events of the day had proven the power of unity, but they also served as a reminder that threats could arise at any moment. His vigilance was unyielding, his resolve unshaken. The next morning, the peace of the plains was interrupted by a sight that startled the herd. From the direction of the rocky outcrop, the wild mustangs were returning. Their leader moved with purpose, his massive frame leading the group toward Midnight's herd. The mares shifted uneasily, their instincts wary of the approaching strangers. Midnight stepped forward, his powerful stride deliberate, as he met the gray stallion halfway. The two leaders stood face to face, their postures commanding but non-threatening. The gray stallion let out a low snort, his eyes scanning the herd before settling on Midnight. In a moment that seemed to transcend words, the gray stallion lowered his head slightly, a gesture of alliance. The wild mustangs began to integrate with Midnight's herd. Their presence was initially met with caution, but gradually accepted. The foal, curious and unafraid, approached one of the wild mares. Its small whinny was a tentative greeting. The mare responded with a gentle nuzzle, her maternal instincts recognizing the foal's innocence. Ember watched the scene unfold from a distance, her sharp eyes taking in the growing unity between the two groups. She let out a satisfied yip before retreating to the edge of the plains. Her role as an ally was not bound by proximity. She would remain close enough to protect, but distant enough to preserve her independence. Over the following days, the combined herd began to move as one. Their numbers provided strength and security. Midnight and the gray stallion led side by side, their alliance a powerful force against any potential threats. The foal, once fragile and uncertain, grew stronger with each passing day. Its small frame filled out as it thrived under the protection of the united herd. The bond between the two groups became a symbol of resilience and the power of coming together in the face of adversity. Midnight's leadership, tempered by courage and wisdom, inspired trust and loyalty among both his own herd and the wild mustangs. The gray stallion's strength and experience added to their collective power, creating a force that was unshakable. One evening, as the stars filled the sky, the herd rested in a wide-open meadow. The foal lay nestled against Midnight, its soft breaths a sign of contentment and safety. Ember sat nearby, her golden coat blending with the grass. Her presence was a quiet reminder of the unlikely friendships that had formed. Midnight looked out over the herd, his heart filled with pride and a sense of fulfillment. They had faced danger, endured hardship, and emerged stronger together. The plains were vast and unpredictable, but with unity and trust, they had created a sanctuary of their own. The story of Midnight, Ember, and a united herd spread through the region, inspiring awe and admiration. It was a tale of courage, resilience, and the extraordinary power of connection, proving that even in the wildest of landscapes, hope could thrive if they believed in the strength of unity and the power of unexpected friendships. If this story moved you, share it with someone who believes in the strength of unity and the power of unexpected friendships. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us for more incredible tales of courage and resilience.